and welcome to today's session. It's the next in the series of the big Lunchtime Conversations. This one is social listening and how it can improve your business. Today's speaker is Megan Reid, Senior Social Media Manager at the Big Partnership. Following today's session, I'll send out a post-event email. It'll contain any post-event collateral, any links to where you can find out about other Pro Manchester events and everything else that's going on, and to our YouTube channel where you can watch some of our sessions back. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded. Please keep your microphones on mute, and feel free to use the chat function, which should be somewhere around the bottom, to ask any questions, make any comments, observations, and we'll address those towards the end. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Megan.
Great, I will just share my screen just now and hope that it works. Can everyone see? Great, I'll just start off the slides then. Okay, so yes, I'm Megan. I thought I would take a note from Craig, my colleague's intro slide, and just let you know a little bit about me before we really get into social listening. I'm the Senior Social Media Manager at Big Partnership. Like most of the digital team, I am based in our Glasgow office, and I've been with Big for about 7 months. I actually started the day before lockdown, so it's pretty much an easy one to track. And previous to that, I was at STV, which is kind of like Scotland's ITV. Things that I like are Facebook groups. They're one of my favourite things. On social media just now, MasterChef Australia, which is far superior to the UK version, and I'm not a fan of uncapitalised hashtags. You have to trust me on this one, but always capitalise the first letter of each word you use in your hashtag. It can lead to some pretty gritty slip-ups in terms of people reading it incorrectly. Susan Album Party from Susan Boyle's album launch a couple of years ago is one that sticks with me. So trust me, it's something you want to be doing. So yeah, moving on. What is social listening? We get asked this a lot, and if you Google it, the first description that will come up is this from HubSpot. Social listening is the monitoring of your brand's social media channels for any customer feedback and direct mentions of your brand discussions regarding specific keywords, topics, competitors, or industries, followed by analysis to gain insights and act on those opportunities. That's a bit of a mouthful. It's a very long sentence. I don't think that's best practice, but it's also, well, not really strictly true. In my opinion, that definition of social listening is a little bit narrow, and really actually tends to focus on what we call owned social. So your owned social is the social media channels that you own. So that's your Facebook page, your Instagram account, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, if you're daring. And it doesn't actually focus on what earned social is, which to me can often be the most important part of your social media landscape. Because what's more important, what a brand is wanting to say about themselves, or what their customers are saying about them, or as well, what their customers are saying about their competitors. And to me, that's really where social listening and a wider look at social listening really comes into its own. It's not just looking at comments on your own posts. In my mind, that's actually community management, and it's something completely different to social listening. It's not just looking at kind of common things that people are saying to you, it's looking at what people are saying perhaps about you, but not to you. And it can inform so many different aspects of your business. I was at Social Media Week last year when it was still okay to go to conferences. And a really good example that was given there that really stuck with me was Danone. And they make lots of different products. One of their products is yogurt, which previously they sold in little individual portion sizes and pots. They use social listening all the time, and they use it quite broadly. So instead of just looking at their brand mentions, they look at people generically talking about yogurt all over the world. And what they saw when they were looking at these photos of people enjoying yogurt is that kind of yogurt and yogurt bowls were really becoming a thing. So actually And in a bowl with lots of different things in it now, and so like seeds or berries, that was becoming the way people like to enjoy yogurt. So it became, this is kind of a bit old news now. Everyone knows that the whole yogurt bowl art trend thing is a thing, but at the time this wasn't the case, and they felt like they were actually missing out on selling more yogurt because they were selling in individual pots and not big cartons or kind of tubs that people could easily put into a bowl. So that really informed their product decisions, and it meant that they ended up selling, I think, 20% more yogurt. It could be that figure might not be quite right, but it really affected their business because of the data they were able to kind of take from social listening. Similarly, Starbucks is a really interesting example as well. They realised that they felt like they weren't getting the whole conversation. And some social listening tools offer reverse image searching as part of listening. So instead of listening for a word or a key phrase or a hashtag, you can actually upload your logo and it will look at photos and see if it can find your logo. And of course, for Starbucks, that revealed so much data, because if you're a bit basic like myself, then when you get Starbucks, you take a photo of it, and their logo is on that cup, or their logo is on the mug, or the disposable cup. And that meant that I think they saw a 50% increase in the amount of mentions that they were able to track, and they were able to get so much more information about the way that people were enjoying their products because of that. Bit of a different one, but when I was at STV, so they have all the same content as ITV, with a few kind of regional programs as well. And we used social listening to find out what people were saying about our programs. So we wanted to know what Scottish Coronation Street fans thought about it, or if we launched a new drama, we wanted to know if people thought it was good, if perhaps maybe they thought the sound was too loud. That happens quite a lot, or maybe they thought the camera was too shaky. So it can really be useful to use social listening to then feed that data back into the business. But how can you be using social listening in practice, either small scale or big scale, within your business? And we've got a few different uses kind of coming up now. So this is one of my favourites, and it's quite a kind of low key way to use social listening, but really, really, really effective, is negative mention alerts. You can set up alerts based off social listening triggers for lots of different things, but a really practical use is to set up an alert when brand mentions reach a kind of certain threshold across lots of different social media platforms. So that could be, for kind of larger brands, it might be over 10. For smaller brands, it could be 2. And it's when your brand has been talked about in a way that you're not happy with, or you feel that you need to address. I'll talk about crisis comms a little bit later in this presentation, but it's a really good way to try and address a problem before it becomes a bigger issue, because a lot of people don't realise when their brands are being talked about, but not to them. And this kind of lets you kind of hit it really, really quickly, and it's a really good way to keep on top of what people are saying about you, especially if it's maybe a wee bit negative. Another great use and really easy way to keep on top of your social listening without having to constantly run reports, which, to be honest, some of the tools we'll talk about make that easy anyway, is setting up a brand listening dashboard. These kind of dashboards update in real time. So it means that if you check it in the morning, it could be different to when you check it on your afternoon lunch break. It might just be me that checks things on their lunch break like that, but I would love social listening. So you can kind of put whatever you want into these dashboards. You can have a sentiment analysis. You can have a look at what topics are trending in relation to your brand or in relation to your product. If you wanted to do a search for yogurt in England or yogurt in Wales or yogurt in the whole of the UK, then you could do that and see what people are talking about when they're talking about that product. And you can also look at the kind of demographic of the people who are talking about your brand or talking about your industry, as well as kind of individual top mentions. And I think that's a really, really interesting thing to look at, particularly if you're considering influencer marketing. It's always great to introduce new people to the brand, but if there's somebody who's got a large following who's already talking about your brand, but maybe not tagging you, social listening tools can flag them, and you can work with them and collaborate with them in a way that you probably might miss before. They could already be a really big fan of your product and you're just not aware. What's also great about social listening dashboards is you can give access to anyone. So it could be you set it up as kind of marketing manager or PR manager, and you can give people access and know that they won't be able to break it because it's kind of outward facing version of social listening. So it's really, really useful to keep lots of people across the business updated. Another great use of social listening, this is one of my favourites, is audience profiling. Quite often we have clients come to us with really, really strict kind of personas for who they think their customers are. And well, a lot of the time they are right. There can quite often be kind of groups that talk about them a lot, that engage with their product a lot, but maybe somebody else buys it. And that is really useful to know that these people are engaging with your brand. And the way we would learn this is looking at brand mentions and try and look at what other brands do they follow, what else are they talking about, do they all have anything else in common, what age, what sex are they, and also, interestingly enough, where, if it's the UK, where in the UK are they based? You could have an incline that you do lots of business in Manchester, but actually when you look at it, the majority of your brand mentions are coming from Birmingham or Leeds or Cardiff, Bristol. So it's a really interesting way to just gather more data and be more informed about the audience that they're buying your product or engaging with your brand or visiting your venue. Crisis mapping and management. And we're good with crises at the big partnership. We help lots of people kind of navigate what can quite often be a very stressful and very tricky time. And social listening is a really interesting tool to have when you're looking at crisis management. It can stop it from progressing to being worse if you know the main point at which perhaps just an odd comment on a social media post or a tweet really kind of got picked up, and you can see with crisis mapping and that kind of little diagram there where it started and where it's kind of reached. Because what might start off as a kind of individual comment on a private Facebook page, which means realistically not a lot of people have seen it. That person may only have 300 friends, but one of them used to be a journalist. And then that moves to lots of different touch points, lots of different platforms, and potentially lots of different publications. So having a kind of I can never say this word, virality mapping tool can be really, really useful. It can also be incredibly useful for seeing how you recover from crises and seeing how your sentiment can change over time. Sentiment mapping and kind of looking at what triggers certain spikes is really useful for businesses, particularly. So you could have a spike in mentions without social listening tool or without kind of proper analysis. You could look at that as a positive. When you actually drill into data and drill into the information, it's not positive. It's perhaps people unhappy and feeling unlistened to. One thing that can happen all the time is people could be thinking they're tweeting at you, but actually that's not your handle. Social listening is a great way to get around that. It used to happen to us quite a lot at STB. The guy who has the STB handle is actually based in Canada. So he got a lot of messages, much like the guy who's at John Lewis on Twitter as well. It's not John Lewis. And then this is kind of the bread and butter of what a lot of people use social listening for, is competitor analysis and comparison. It's interesting to see your brand through your customers' eyes, really, because what you think they see in your brand versus what you think they see in your competitor's brand can be totally different. So it's really good to know kind of, do they use your slogans back at you? Do they say the same phrases back to you? And then at STV, we always thought we were Scottish and we're known for our dramas. Turns out we're Scottish and known for news. So it's important to know that what you think about your brand and what you think about your competitor's brand sometimes isn't what the public sees, and it can really give you that bit of perspective. Because when you're working on a kind of singular brand, which having been client side as well as now agency, I can understand you can get way too close into your own brand, and social listening just basically widens your kind of horizon to what's going on for your brand and kind of gives you that look outside to the wider social media landscape. So, can all social listening platforms do these tasks for me? Unfortunately, not all social listening platforms, and I'm going to use actually air quotes here, social listening platforms are created the same. Some are better value and have less functionality. Some are a little bit more expensive and have more functionality. And when you Google social listening tools, these are the ones that come up as the Google search ads. So you've got their Social Bakers, Crisp Thinking, Pulsar, and Sprout Social. Now there's a couple there that I wouldn't consider social listening platforms. There's a couple there that, to me, they sound like that HubSpot definition of what social listening is and not the wider look of it. So always do your research. There's plenty of articles out there that go over different social listening tools and kind of will give you their 2 cents on it. Sometimes those need to be taken with a pinch of salt too, but we'll go through a few just now, and kind of, if some of them you've heard of, some of them you may not have, some of them are quite well known. So yeah, Social Bakers. A lot of people use Social Bakers for their own social, so your channels that you own. It's great for looking at that, and it does have some functionality that looks at owned social. It is good, but it's not the kind of full package that we would say from other social listening terms. It doesn't use Boolean terms, and this is something that I'll talk about when I'm comparing these tools. Boolean terms basically allow you to really drill down in terms of what it is you're searching for and where you're searching for it. Because lots of social media listening tools, they charge you per mention. So a mention is one tweet, a mention is one Instagram post. And if you're not if you've got a limited budget and you're not kind of directional enough, you can end up paying for results that actually aren't useful to you. So being able to have really tight Boolean terms to say, well, my brand name, but not my brand name if it's near this word, which could mean that it's actually talking about a brand that has a similar name to yours, means that you're not wasting your mentions. And some social listening tools can also let you geolocate to individual countries. So quite often the UK is treated as a whole country, which it is. But if you only want to focus on Scotland, or you only want to focus on England or Wales or Northern Ireland, a lot of tools don't allow you to do that, and Social Bakers is one of those. Obviously, Social Bakers, I think, is £150 to £300 a month. So it is expensive for not getting that kind of additional benefit of being able to tie down your numbers a bit. Sprout Social. Sprout Social has been around for a while, and while it's a great tool, particularly on the owned side of things, quite often we find that the numbers you get from Sprout Social can be vastly different from the numbers you get if you download the data straight from the platform, particularly Facebook. So I would even take it with a pinch of salt for owned social. In terms of earned social, it does an all right job. You're not going to get the same level of detail that you'll get from some other tools. And I think they have put their prices up, so it's now the minimum package is £100 or $100 a month. Oops, wrong way. Pulsar, that's an interesting logo. But Pulsar is quite a good one. I haven't used it in a few years, but it does allow you to use Boolean terms to be quite specific. It does have some good looking graphs, which is something you need to consider when you're choosing a social listening tool, because there'll be lots of graphs. And the way you're going to report on it will be quite graph heavy. So you don't want to have to take the data from the tool and have to repackage it for internal use or to share with customers or team leaders. It's got to be kind of as easy for you to use that tool as possible. Pulsar does require a wee bit of know-how in terms of how to use it, but they do have a great team that are able to kind of help and give you training on it. The one thing with Pulsar is I'm not sure if it geolocates to certain locations, but it is a good tool, but does need a bit of fiddling to get it into some presentations. Brandwatch. Brandwatch is kind of the OG of social listening, and up until a few years ago, it worked really well, but it wasn't the prettiest tool. It did require quite a lot of kind of jiggery-pokery to present it in a way that could either be on brand or just look nice and modern. and like the kind of cutting edge tool that it is. And they've since changed that, and it does work really well. But I would still say it's definitely kind of at the professional end of these social listening tools. It does require quite a lot of know-how to work it, and it can be quite fiddly. But the results are great, and lots of big brands use it, lots of agencies use it as well. But yeah, Awario is a new social listening tool. It's actually fairly cheap. I think it's $29 to $39 a month starting off, and it does have lots of great functionality. It has really good way of presenting the information, which become really important when you're using the tool. It's not quite as kind of in depth as Brandwatch, so it's kind of slightly cheaper than Social Bakers, but probably a kind of good in between Social Bakers and Brandwatch in terms of functionality. And it's a good option to try out. We've been using it for a while. And then this is a social listening tool that we really like, and it's one that all my examples are from, which is called Talkwalker. Talkwalker is on the pricier side of things, and it does work on a per mentions model, and that kind of start at 10,000 mentions and go up to 100,000 mentions, and then there's another package. But we like Talkwalker because it's incredibly flexible, and with our clients, they need to be able to feel like if they ask us, we can deliver that, and it allows us to geolocate, it can do reverse image searching, it can look at hashtags, it can look at lots of different platforms. You can also use it if you wanted to for your own analysis as well. You can link it with all your profiles, which just means it's got good flexibility, because quite often we're doing a social listening report, there will also be some owned activity there as well. And you don't want to kind of have, this is from a kind of aesthetic and personal point of view, you don't want to have a beautiful report with all these gorgeous graphs, and then you get to the bit where you're talking about your own channels and the graphs don't match up and they aren't as pretty. But it's a really useful, high-powered tool, and it's a wee bit more, I would say, user-friendly than Brandwatch, although it does still have Boolean terms that allow you to really drill down into the data and really kind of get what you need from it. But yeah, that's me kind of come to the end of my love story on social listening. I think it's really, really valuable in terms of types of decisions that can help you make for your business, and finding out kind of what's working for you and being really objective, feeding that data back into your business. But if you guys have any questions or anything I've not covered, or any tools you'd like to ask me about, I might not know them, hopefully I will, and if I do, I probably have an opinion. But yeah, any questions?
Thanks for that, Megan. Just got one coming in. What, if anything, is the difference between social monitoring and social listening? So
to me, social monitoring is your day-to-day social reporting. I think a lot of different social media marketers and digital marketers in general, we all tend to have different names for things, which isn't particularly helpful. But yeah, to me, social monitoring is really your day-to-day and also weekly and monthly reporting that you should be doing on all of your channels. So that is, how's my reach doing? How's my engagements doing? How are my link clicks? How am I getting people to the website? Also, it's a really big part of community management. So when people are asking you questions through Messenger or in comments, keeping a log of all that, because the same question can be coming up more often than you think, and you're maybe not realizing it. So to me, that's all the other stuff to do with that as well. I think monitoring is something you should be doing with your social channels every day.
And got another comment here, interesting point on capitalizing your hashtags. What if your peers don't?
If they don't,
yeah, I guess, yeah.
Try and use, I mean, the best example is the one that I mentioned there, the Susan album party example, the poor Susan Boyle. But I think try and use some of the ridiculous examples to really show them that it's a really simple thing to do. And if it's something that they feel like, well, I'm just typing it quickly, like I don't have time to capitalize, then the way we tend to get around it is having just a document of hashtags that you know work, having them all capitalized in the way that you want to, and then people can just copy and paste them, and maybe that'll take out the kind of excuse that, well, I'm too busy, because it's really important.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, I struggle, even if there's not a faux pas like that one. I just generally struggle to read them if they're not.
Exactly, it does just make them less readable. And the whole point of if you're with a hashtag, you're either tapping into a current hashtag to join the conversation and kind of bump up your reach and kind of make sure that you're kind of part of the conversation, or you're trying to start a new hashtag and start a trend and get people to join your conversation. And if people don't know what the hashtag says, then they're not going to use it either. So it goes hand in hand with that, and also sometimes long tail hashtags are necessary, but trying to keep them as kind of condensed as possible without also that having an added on effect of not understanding them. So hashtags that are kind of acronyms aren't ideal either, because then they're all
Well, Megan, thank you so much. I think that's it for the questions. So all it leaves me to say is thank you so much to Big Partnership. Thank you very much to Megan, our host, and thank you to all of you for joining us. So thanks a lot, everyone, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next Big Lunchtime Conversation in a couple of weeks.
Okay, great.
Bye, everyone.
Much, guys. Bye.